Hey, welcome to the channel. It's Jack with Stronghold Strength and Conditioning. And today, I've got 8 squat mistakes that are killing your performance. But before we get into it, make sure you take a moment and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future content like this. Every Thursday, I'm putting out videos showing you how to resolve aches and pains, prevent injuries, and overall optimize your performance inside the gym and outside of it in your daily life and routine. And it does not get better than that. So go ahead and take advantage of it. Ready? Let's go ahead and dive into it. All right, like I said, today's video is giving you 8 mistakes that are happening in your squat that are killing your performance. And ironically enough, half of them, 4 of those 8, are occurring right at your feet, your base and your setup, how you set up those feet to help you actively be engaged in the squat and connected to the ground that you're working from. So this is why it's important to at least have that conversation with yourself of, am I squatting barefoot? Do I have a shoe that allows me to feel and connect to the floor? Or am I killing myself right from the ground up, causing other issues because my base is altered by the footwear that I'm wearing when I squat? Something very important. A lot of people blame squats for hurting their knees. It's not the squat, it's the type of footwear you're wearing, it's how you're squatting that's causing the knee pain. So if that's you, pay close attention because these are things that are going to matter to help you squat pain-free at the knees especially. Ready? Let's go ahead and start getting into them. Mistake number 1, stance width. So the distance of our feet apart from one another really matters in our squat because it's going to change how things function above and below in that stance. So if we set up too wide, for example, with our feet outside of our shoulder width in a very wide stance, we're going to have limitations that will most likely show up at our hips that are going to feel like they get tight and locked up near the bottom of that squatting position. So if you feel like your hips are a limiting factor, you might want to check your foot width when you set up and make sure that it is not too wide. If it's too narrow, we're going to be challenging more of our ankle mobility overall. So our ability to actually allow the foot to connect to the floor with that stance and have balance there and an evenly engaged foot with the ground. So too wide or too narrow can be a problem either way. What I recommend personally is hip or shoulder width apart. So just outside of hip, right around shoulder width. And that is where you want to be for an ideal loaded squat. Body weight squats, you can play with different variations on the width because we don't have any excess load. But when there is load, we want to make sure that we have an ideal stance, which is about hip to shoulder width apart. Mistake number 2, foot pressure. So the balance of our foot is extremely important in our squat, and the surface area that we have connecting to the ground is very important in our squat. If your weight of your squat feels like it shifts to the ball of your foot, the balance of your squat is off. If your weight feels like it shifts too far back to the heel in your squat, your balance is off. We want our balance to be right in the center of the foot with the whole foot connecting to the floor. And in order to do this, what we do is make a tripod foot on each side. That is the first metatarsal behind the big toe, the 5th metatarsal behind the smallest toe, and then the heel making that tripod or that triangular base on each side. From there, that surface area allows us to create friction against the floor and work with the function of our hip, the external rotation, to create what's called torsion. This is the stability of our leg. But if we don't have that base because our foot is too narrow or our balance is shifted to one of the metatarsals too far and it's not in the center of the foot, then we are affecting how much torsion we can create through the leg or how much stability we can create through the leg. Mistake number 3, foot turnout. Now, there's a reasonable amount of turnout that we want to allow if it happens because there are different hip structures here. But what's important to note is that if our feet get turned out too far, again, we start to affect the stability of our leg because we're no longer able to use that concept of friction versus torque to create torsion. If we are turned out already, the friction gets decreased because the range that we are able to actually drag through torque is not as great. So we're losing that stability by turning our feet out too far. So what's a reasonable amount of turnout? I recommend personally parallel or 0 to 30 degrees. If you are able to keep one foot straight and parallel through the squat, but one foot turns out, there's likely an imbalance there and you're actually able to squat parallel, which might just take some work to get yourself back to both feet parallel to begin with. Now, if you cannot get through a full range of motion with your feet parallel, you feel very inhibited there, again, it can be slightly variable from person to person and you can play with that, but 0 to 30 degrees is optimal in your squat under load specifically so that you can be performing at your greatest amount of stability through the leg. Mistake number 4, inactive feet. And this is actually a really big one because if we have inactive feet during our squat, this can actually affect our balance, and it doesn't necessarily matter if we line them up parallel and if we have a good stance and the width that we have. If we have inactive feet, it's going to cause us to collapse and likely lose again stability through the leg. Part of that is the natural way that our arch is designed and that our feet are active is through the way that our leg creates stability. So if I have my 3 points of contact, that first metatarsal, fifth metatarsal, and heel, and I add that external rotation from the hip, and I create that torsion, that stability of the leg, what I should see is that my arch actually gets created and my feet are actively gripping and engaging the floor. We want that engaged foot when we are squatting in order to maximize, again, stability of the leg and to ensure that we are getting the most force out of our legs to begin with through the squat itself. All right, mistake number 5, and now we're starting to get away from the feet actually that we've been through those first 4. So the next 4 are moving up the system as we go. And mistake number 5 is a knee first squat. So in our squat, this is a knee dominant movement, but the squat actually begins with a small hinge. If my knees move first, it's a sign that my movement patterning for the squat is off and I don't truly understand how to move to properly squat in the first place. So what we want to do when we squat is actually load the posterior chain first by sending ourselves into a small hip hinge and then open the knees wide as we pull ourselves into the bottom of the squat. I like to think of like a scissor lift movement, that we're actually pulling open in both directions on the lowering and even on the raising, that causes us to be able to control the knees and what's happening at the knee itself. Another one we could add here would be knee valgus. So if those knees cave, that is the opposite of this scissor lift and part of that motor patterning that we don't understand. We don't truly get the idea of driving and holding the knees wide or in a good alignment with our foot overall. So again, knee forward first or knee collapse. Any movement at the knee that drives it out of alignment with that middle toe is part of the problem with your squat. Mistake number 6, lumbar extension fault. So when we hinge in our squat, this is another movement error that's commonly seen, and it points back to our ability to stabilize our core and organize our core in the squat. Oftentimes, what we'll see if there's a fault is that there's a lumbar extension, and the arch of the spine occurs at the beginning of the movement. So if it's not the knees moving first, it's usually the low back moving first into an arch when it should be stabilized to create that hip hinge once again. So in order to properly hinge, we should be able to maintain neutral spinal column with stability, especially under that load, to create a good squat, solid structure, and not lose or dump force or weight into that lumbar spine, which is why if you're getting low back tightness after your squats, you're probably doing this fault. Dumping your pelvis into anterior tilt, tightening up the lumbar spine, and by doing that, you're minimizing the effectiveness of your glutes and killing your mobility overall. Mistake number 7, and a lot of people wouldn't think of this one, because how much are shoulder blades actively engaging in a squat? Well, maybe more than you think they should. And scapular instability is our number 7 mistake. If we're doing a body weight squat, this might look like spinal flexion and scapular protraction. So a rounding of the thoracic, a reach forward, and this shows, again, core instability overall. We have to think of our scapula as part of our core. Under load, what this looks like is feeling that way to the bar and feeling like you're trying to lift the bar up with your scapula and upper traps. We do not want to be lifting that bar off of our core. We want that weight to become part of our own weight and core structure. So the more that we can externally rotate at the shoulder and connect the scapula by depressing them and retracting them into our thoracic range of our spinal column, this is going to connect that weight to our core better and make it easier for us to lift that weight with a cleaner lift overall. This can be a hard skill to learn because it's very tempting to try and cheat using our upper traps to lift that weight off of our body, but we are killing our leg strength when we do that because we're taking it away and disconnecting it from the lift itself. So keep the shoulder blades in a good position. And last but not least, mistake number 8, and this might not be one you think of either, but head positioning matters, and this is specifically going to be called a cervical extension fault. Now, if you're familiar with anything that comes with the line of body work, you might be familiar with the Lovett brothers relationship of the spine. And this is a relationship where there's inverse relationships with what's going on at the vertebrae. So what's happening up at my C1 is affecting what's going down on my L5-S1 range. That is something that can be truly impactful in how we organize and stabilize our core in our squat. So if I extend my cervical spine, there's a good chance that I'm going to extend my lumbar spine because of that same connection through the fascia and the control of those vertebrae. The muscles are connected in that way. So what we want to do is be aware that we're keeping our neck in a neutral position by tucking the chin to the Adam's apple, not looking down, pulling back into neutral spine so that we're able to also affect what our lumbar spine is doing and control our lumbar spine better in that way. And overall, have a better core structure to lift that weight through. All right, and there you have it. 8 common squat mistakes, 4 of them that occur right at the foot themselves in the setup that you're making that are killing your squat performance. If you like this video, make sure you let me know by clicking that big thumbs up down below, and take a moment to share this one with a friend, your squat buddy in the gym, so that they can polish up their squat technique as well. If you're a parent who struggles with training aches or reoccurring injuries, or simply stiffness, and you feel that your mobility is restricted and you want to improve your mobility or rid yourself of those aches and pains in the next 12 weeks, what I need to do is drop down below in the description and fill out the coaching application. What we'll do is get in contact with you so that we can see about how we might be able to help you move in the right direction with your mobility overall, or resolving the ache and pain that you're struggling through. And last but not least, if you are someone who has not subscribed yet, make sure you take a moment and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future content like this. Every Thursday, I'm putting out videos showing you how to resolve aches and pains, prevent injuries, and overall optimize your performance inside the gym and outside of it in your daily life and routine. And it doesn't get better than that. Welcome to the Stronghold Army. I'll catch you next week.